Kit, and today I wanted to talk to you about habits. Now, habits is obviously a huge topic because we're trying to break them or we're trying to create them all the time. And I think a lot of the time we don't realize that we even have habits. We don't realize that the fact that you wake up at a certain time and do the four things that follow that's actually a habit. Same thing comes to our thinking habits. A lot of the time we forget that habits are going on inside of our heads all the time. The fact that every time you're bored you eat is probably a habit. It's not a choice that you're making, it's an automatic process. I want to tell you a story about one of the biggest studies that's been done on habits in the world today. There was a man called Eugene who lost the part of his mind that stored your memories, that stores his memories. So he lost everything to do with memories. There was nothing there at all. And yet every day him and his wife would go for a walk. Now they would always do the same course. This was an elderly man. One day his wife came through to the lounge and she found that Eugene had disappeared. She obviously knew that he couldn't remember anything, no short-term or long-term memory. And so she panicked. She ended up finding search parties and they just searched everywhere for him. And he eventually came home, and the same thing happened the next day and the day after that. And so she started following him. And what she realized was that he was doing the exact walk around the block that she would do with him. But he had no memory whatsoever of where he'd been or where he was going. He had no part of his brain to store memories. And yet somehow he was remembering. He was doing the exact route. And she obviously took him forward to be studied, and he became this case study that's now famous. And what they realized was that the way habits form is that all we need for a habit to form is we need a trigger, something that happens before the habit. And then we need a reward, a happy feeling, a good feeling that makes us want to repeat this habit. And that's what all that habits are. They're not stored in our memories. It's not something that you don't go, oh, I remember that I should be doing whatever. It's literally automatic. The trigger just needs to hit and the reward needs to be in place, and that same habit cycle will be repeated. So for him, the trigger was hearing the radio turn on. His wife would turn on the radio without even realizing that she was triggering a habit for him. And as he heard that radio, he would then leave the room and off he'd go for his walk. Now, I bring this up because when it comes to exercise, we often don't realize this. What is it? What trigger do you have in place in your life already that you could use to start triggering the habit of exercise? So it could be something as simple as you could create a habit. So you could create something like you put your exercise shoes next to your bed. And as you wake up, you see those shoes and you then go and perform the habit. You go and do the exercise. Now, if we do this enough times, our brains remember it. So how this works is that your brain is hardwired towards certain things. So if you repeat any habit enough times, and I'm going to show you physically, if you repeat it enough times, this hardwire, this new thought pattern basically grows in size. So let's say it starts out like this. I see my shoes and I exercise. And as you repeat that habit, it gets bigger and bigger. And what happens then is your brain automatically goes towards the big habit. So if you ever wanted to break that habit, your brain would keep going towards the current habit until you form a new hardwire that's bigger than the old hardwire. So let's say in the past you would wake up and you would go and make some coffee. That would be the current hardwire. If you wanted to now start exercising, you would need to do this enough times that this one was bigger than this one, so that your brain automatically goes towards the bigger one. So that's why we say a habit forms in 21 days, because if you repeat it enough times, this new habit will be bigger than the old habit. So pulling this all together, how this would work is if you're wanting to form a habit of exercise and you're struggling to get into this is what I suggest. I firstly suggest that you find a trigger for your habit. So that trigger could be when you drive home from work. That could be the trigger. It could be that, like I said, you put your exercise shoes next to your bed. The trigger could be that you hit a certain emotion. Every time you feel frustrated, you exercise. Now, at the beginning, you're forcing the habit. So for the first 21 days, you have to force that habit to match that trigger. So every time that trigger hits, match it with the habit of exercise. So the shoes are there, therefore I see the shoes, I must go and exercise. After 21 days, your brain will start remembering this trigger. So your brain will literally see the shoes, and this habit in your brain will be so big, will be so sort of ingrained in you that it will become an automatic process. Much like driving, you jump in your car and you don't have to think, what should I press now? You just do it because it's hardwired. And so by seeing your shoes after 21 days, your brain will automatically go, exercise. It's exercise time. And this will become easier with time, which is why we suggest and we encourage you to try and push through for those first 3 weeks. Which is 21 days. Try and push through until exercise becomes something that's normal for you. Now, the last thing I want to bring up with habits is reward, something I spoke about earlier with Eugene. They realized that if there's no reward, your brain won't remember it. Your brain needs to think of exercise as a happy thing. So with time, you'll produce endorphins, and that will make you feel happier, and you'll want to keep doing the habit. But at the beginning, you might not. And so what I suggest is that you follow exercise with something that's enjoyable. So perhaps if you're going to the gym to exercise, then perhaps you get a smoothie afterwards. And every time you have that smoothie, your brain remembers this is a happy experience. And again, within 21 days, your brain's likely to form that habit because it associated exercise with something happy. Another way of doing it is if you're at home, let's say you're exercising in the evening, perhaps you have a glass of wine afterwards. If you're pregnant, I don't suggest that, or breastfeeding, your choice. But for those that are pregnant, perhaps you can have a piece of chocolate afterwards, or a bath, a long bath. And again, your brain might start remembering exercise with the happy experience of having a long bath afterwards. If it's in the morning, maybe coffee. I know I do that. I have a good cup of coffee after I've exercised. I first down a glass of water just to get it in, and then make a cup of coffee. But somehow what you're trying to do is, if the exercise itself doesn't make you feel good, then match it with something that does make you feel good. All we're trying to do is trick our brains to remember this as a positive experience. Within time, your brain then will, like I said, hardwire it, and you won't need to continue doing this habit. So you can actually stop, but your brain will remember exercise as a happy thing. So 21 days is all it takes. Good luck, make it work, and be hard on yourself for these first 21 days. Not hard on yourself, but be persistent, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm excited to hear the results. Let me know what you think and whether you think that this will work for you. Cheers!